The Power of the Sign of the Cross in the Admirable Life of Father Alexander Vincent Jandel. The Order of Friars Preachers has been blessed with many saintly and memorable Master Generals in the past 800 years. Some shine a little brighter than others, and no doubt Father Alexander Vincent Jandel is certainly one of those bright stars among the sons and daughters of St. Dominic. Besides his incredible zeal for the strict observance of the Dominican rule and his capability of restoring the Order of Friars Preachers to a relevant force in the Church again in the 19th century, he was also blessed, or challenged, as one might say, by supernatural events that would only solidify his fervor for the Catholic faith, but he would also use these examples to bring souls to heaven. I would like to share a true event that occurred in his early years as a priest in December of 1848. My hope is that this event will show how important the sign of the cross is and what it is not. So many of us carelessly make the sign of the cross when we walk into a church. Yet, do we think of those 5 wounds our Lord suffered? Do we realize that we bless ourselves with the sign of our redemption? Do you care that without the meaning of that cross, the gates of heaven would remain closed to all of us? Hopefully, this shining example of the power of the cross and this holy priest will make you think the next time you go to make the sign of the cross. Father Jandel became a well-known spiritual director, and many holy persons placed themselves under his guidance, and his preaching was very fruitful in its results. A sermon was delivered in Lyon by Father Jandel on the power of the sign of the cross, and due to that sermon, he had the following extraordinary sequel. On leaving the cathedral, Father Jandel was stopped by a man who said to him, "Sir, do you believe in what you have just been preaching?" Father Jandel replied, "If I do not believe in it, I should not preach it." He answered, "The power of the sign of the cross is recognized by the Church. I hold it for certain." The stranger expressed his astonishment. "Well, for myself," he said, "I am a Freemason, and I do not believe. But because I am exceedingly surprised at what you have been teaching, I am going to suggest that you should put the sign of the cross to the proof. Every night we meet in such and such a street at number so-and-so, and the demon comes himself to preside at the seance. Come with me tonight. We will keep close to the door of the room. Make the sign of the cross over the assembly, and I shall see if what you have said is to be true." Father Jandel very naturally and very properly excused himself from entering into this sudden compact, and yet the man seemed genuine enough. "I believe in the power of the sign of the cross," he said, "but I cannot agree to your proposal without mature consideration. Give me 3 days to think about it." "Very well," replied the Freemason. "When you are willing to prove your faith, I shall be at your service." And he gave him his address. Father Jandel went at once to Monsignor de Bonald and asked him whether he ought to accept the challenge. The Archbishop called in some of his theologians to discuss with them for a long time the pros and cons. They decided at last that Father Jandel ought to accept the offer. So the Archbishop sent for him and bade him go. "Go, my son," he said, giving Father Jandel his blessing, and may God be with you. 40 hours still remained, and Father Jandel spent them in prayer and mortifications. On the evening of the 3rd day, he presented himself before the Freemason, completely disguised in the clothes of a layman. They set out and soon arrived at the large hall, luxuriously furnished, where they established themselves near the door. The hall gradually filled, and all the seats were occupied, when, as usual, the demon appeared under the human form. Instantly, Father Jandel drew forth the crucifix, which he had concealed upon his breast, held it on both hands, and made a large sign of the cross over the assembly. A thunderbolt could not have had a more unexpected, sudden, or disturbing effect. The lights were extinguished, the chairs were upset, and the panic-stricken audience fled. The Freemason hurried Father Jandel away, and when they found themselves outside, hardly knowing how they had escaped from the scene of darkness and confusion, he cast himself upon his knees at the priest's feet. "I believe," he cried, "I believe." And after the necessary probation and instruction, he was received into the Catholic Church. Can one act of devotion to our Lord such as making the sign of the cross with devotion, be enough to make demons go running? The answer is yes. If the Lord permits to challenge our faith briefly, then it will be that easy. When the sign of the cross is done devoutly, it becomes a moment of reflection before the beginning of Mass, prayer, or in moments of temptation. This act of worship will help us remember what Christ gave us and his eternal love for each soul. He gave us the opportunity to go to heaven, and his foe, Satan, cannot even resist the simple sign of the cross if the Lord chooses so. Remember, the sign of the cross is not some robotic gesture upon entering a Catholic church, but it is a blessing, a sign of your faith and your hope.